Shemai, Syndicate, Croeso, Chris, Adoe, what is cracking, ladies, gents, boys, girls, and, well, lit. And anyone who is anyone. Today we are talking about Jason Bryan's The Shitkickers. And before I go into this video, I just want to say that I did purchase a copy of this book with my own money. This is going to be an honest review, an honest, cheeky chat. It's going to be quite cheeky, quite chatty. So without further ado, let's get into the book. But before we actually get into the book, you turn the bad boy around, you look at the back, you read the blurb, and what does it say? It doesn't actually say anything. There's not a brief rundown of the story. There's not like a synopsis. It's just a bunch of statements. One says, stop buying avocado toast. And it's written by some boomer. A world-class city, local crackhead. Turn your house into cash. Upstart young real estate agent. People still read books? No, people still read. You, most likely. And it says published in Canada. And, I don't know, I just think, honestly, the book is actually pretty good. It could have done with maybe like just a brief rundown on the back. And honestly, the story is actually interesting enough for that brief rundown to sell copies. But either way, we get into the book itself, and the introduction is quite interesting. You have Ken. Ken's the main character. He doesn't feel like a self-insert, which I felt was something that was quite prominent in the academy. Not necessarily godless stuff. He just writes about kids doing their own thing. That sounded weird. You get what I mean, though. This book, Ken seems to be his own character. Now Ken starts off a bit of a simp, you know. He simps for his girlfriend, and it's a bit like oof. It's a bit like man up, bro. But the whole thing really starts off. His bike gets stolen by one of the local homeless people that lives in like a tent city in some park somewhere, and being that is the modern day, as Ken's trying to get his bike back from this tramp, he's like going, oh, I'm disabled. And he literally starts reeing, and some fella starts filming it with his camera phone. So you got this guy filming this action, this interaction with his phone, and then Ken just sort of feels pressured into letting this tramp steal his bike. Now this is kind of like, it's his origin story in a sense. You know, Batman, his parents get shot in front of him. Ken sort of lets a homeless man steal his bike. And I absolutely have to say, in this scenario, it is perfectly acceptable for you to just leather them, just batter them. Do what you need to do, get your bike back, my guy. Go on, Ken. Get in there. But nevertheless, this sort of interaction leaves Ken feeling kind of humiliated and annoyed and angry, and then he just sort of feels frustrated at the fact that the police are kind of unwilling to actually tackle crimes committed by the homeless. It's as if there's some sort of endangered species, and it all just builds up inside of Ken, you know. He sees homeless people raiding like a shop, like some sort of militia, and as one of the old fellas who owns the shop, he punches one of them, he gets arrested. You know, it's sort of like that. The police are sort of like, you are not allowed to discriminate against homeless people. They are an endangered species. We gotta protect them. Which eventually boils up into Ken deciding he's gonna get his bike back. He dresses up like a vigilante. He's very much like a Canadian Batman. Maybe not a Canadian Batman, but Batman if you ordered it, maybe from Wish. But it is cool. Ken turns out to be pretty cool. He basically goes to like this corner shop. The guy's like, yeah, the homeless people next door, all they do is steal our coffee, and there's nothing we could do about it. So Ken's like, okay, I'm gonna trick this guy into leaving the shop. He sneaks in, he spikes the coffee pot with laxatives, and then he waits for these homeless people to drink the coffee. Now, they do actually drink the coffee, and it is hilarious. They go back to their own little camp, and they start soiling. They start pooing. They're taking fat dumps uncontrollably, and this is probably deeply traumatic to these guys who don't actually have houses. It's quite cynical, to be fair. It's quite mean. But Ken does get his bike back. He clubs some guy in the back of the head, I think, with his bike as well. At some point, he clubs him in the head. I can't remember what with. And it turns out this weird police chase where he unintentionally runs over a dog. But what happens is he's all over the news, and Ken has these very unique trainers given to him by his girlfriend, who sort of says literally ooh woo in one of her texts. It is what it is. It's kind of cool. Is it kind of cool? I know somebody who actually talks like this girl in real life, which is quite But I digress. So Ken's shoes are all over the news. They are very limited. They can be used to identify him, and he sort of takes them to a cleaner, tries getting them sorted out because his girlfriend bought them. He realizes like the difficulties his girlfriend would have had getting them, and what ends up happening is he's introduced to Mistress S. Now Mistress S is very much, I don't know, she's like the bad guy of the story. She sort of uses Ken, she blackmails him into doing stuff for her, and this really starts off, you know, the story goes up to 11 after this point. It's very interesting, very dynamic, action packed. and it is actually quite good. So a brief recap, Ken has his bike stolen by a homeless man who may or may not actually be homeless, I can't remember, and in order to exact his revenge, he spikes the homeless man and all his homeless friends with laxatives. It's very much a bit of vigilantism, and you know, it's sort of like, what else are you meant to do, I suppose, in this adventure. You know, he calls up the police, and the police are like, they say it's their bike, so what are you gonna do, bruh? What are you gonna do, chud? You're gonna get cancelled. And it's like, well, it is hilariously petty. And Ken gets his bike back. Like I said, the whole story then goes up to 11 from this point onwards. Mistress S very much has Ken wrapped around a pinky finger, and as a result, Ken is now carrying out crimes. He is committing crimes, normally on camera, where it can be used to blackmail him. And I just think it's very interesting because Mistress S's whole like syndicate has stupid amounts of people who also do these crimes, and Ken is very much thrust into, like, I suppose, a criminal underworld kind of thing. I don't really know if, because these people themselves, I don't really know if they're vigilantes themselves, because I just sort of got the impression that they were just general criminals, and then Ken just sort of carries out vigilantism. This bit is good though, I did actually enjoy this bit. But I'm going to get into like maybe some of the smaller details now. So character development. Now Ken, he starts off as a bit of a pushover, a bit of a wimp, and he does actually develop into more of a man. He develops into more of a tough guy. And you know, there's a point where a taxi driver's just sort of rinsing him for a bit more money. You know, he's taking him through the scenic route just to get, you know, $10 more out of him. And then Ken kicks off. I think he strangles him from the back seat, and it's like, you know, Ken sort of overreacts kind of thing, but I get the impression that it's done out of deep insecurity that is being used by a criminal. And he turns into an alcoholic with an addiction to what seems to just be vodka, and I suppose it's a coping mechanism. It is interesting, you know, I spend a lot of time in real life with alcoholics, not like they're my mates, I just spend time with them as part of my job, and a lot of them do seem to be doing it to drown their sorrows. They're not drinking for fun, they're kind of drinking to cope, they're drinking to keep on top of their alcoholism, and that sort of turns into Ken's thing. He's not drinking to celebrate, he's drinking to sort of get through the day. And it is interesting to see Ken go from like this little wimpy guy to an alcoholic vigilante who's a bit like a Canadian Batman who's just battering the homeless. The other characters sort of take a back seat. Ken is very much the primary character, he gets the majority of the character development. Mistress S is developed from being like this flirtatious shoe seller to, well, Mistress S. It's interesting, it is fun. But, you know, how I describe the book, it's very much like an action film. You know, for like the last maybe 100 pages, I put on a playlist, and it just felt like I was really, like, it felt somewhat like an action film, you know. There is sort of political commentary, and ongoing theme sort of seems to be how just crazy the world has gone about the masks around COVID, and it's sort of interesting because I'm getting the impression this was written sort of at the start of the pandemic kind of thing. Where sort of everyone was freaking out and it's just went insane because it went crazy everywhere. But then it sort of goes on to how the justice system failed in Canada. You know, Ken's life wouldn't have been ruined if the police just did their job and got his bike back. And it's interesting because theoretically the whole thing was caught on camera by that fella filming it, so he could have just provided the footage to the police. They got Ken's bike back, problem solved. Ken's life wouldn't have been ruined, the tramps wouldn't have been spiked with laxatives, everything would have been okay. And although the book is fun, it's action packed, it's genuinely quite enjoyable to read. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. It is interesting because Ken's life wouldn't have been changed as radically as it had been if society hadn't been sort of like ruined and riddled by these wokeisms. Now, to avoid this video becoming too political, I'm just going to move on, I'm just going to leave that there. The book itself is fun, it's action packed, and at the end of the day it is a decent read. At 423 pages, there isn't really a point where the book just seems to be troddling on and on and on and on, going on about literally nothing. There always seems to be something happening, and the pacing itself is quite good. The character development itself is quite good, and the characters themselves are quite good. You know, you can sort of see behind Ken's justifications for what he's doing. It all comes from a place of hurt and frustration, and I suppose we've all been in situations where we feel hurt and frustrated. He's a believable character, especially when you consider that later parts in the book where he does start to act out. These instances might be fueled by the fact that he is an alcoholic who might be going into withdrawals after not having a sip for a while. But I suppose in conclusion, the book is actually a fun read. It is good, I enjoyed it. It's one of those reads that, you know, if I didn't have COVID, I probably would have read it maybe in 2 sit-ins. You know, because it's just fun. It's just good read. It was, and I would recommend it. I don't know if the prices come back because I know that I spent, I think, about £17 on it, and I think it's about $20. I can see that being a massive turn off for a lot of people. Price aside, I would recommend this book. You know, it is actually pretty good. Now, if everything I've said about the book doesn't sound like something you'd enjoy, obviously don't buy it. I don't want to see any threads saying, oh, why are people saying this book's good on YouTube? I spent £20 on it and I didn't like it. Obviously, use your head, use your brain, think for yourself. Like, you know, if you're not going to enjoy this book, don't buy it. But if you are, yeah, you're in for a decent read. Now, the next book that I want to talk about, the next bit of literature, is probably going to be Eggplant by the old Ogden Nesma. You know, it seems like a decent read. And then there's another book that I want to talk about, but you know, we're gonna see when we get there. I want to celebrate, I suppose, Lit's achievements. I want to promote these books because at the end of the day, these people, I suppose, are making it. But yeah, you know, if you watch this far, I just want to say thank you. Hopefully you have a lovely day, a lovely week, a lovely month, a lovely life, and hopefully you take care. So without further ado, ta-ra.